Good afternoon. Welcome to our Talent and Growth Roundtable webinar. Thank you for tuning in live if you are. Thank you also for catching up on the podcast if you're doing that, like many people do. I think we've got a great conversation coming this week, and something that's really important to me, important to my guests, certainly, and probably important to you if you're listening. And I think it's something that's really we always think it's relevant, don't we? But I think it's just so relevant right now when the world is in such a state of flux and there's so much going on. There's so much pressures on people, businesses. Everyone's got a story about the hardship they're going through right now, it seems to me. So I think it's ever so relevant to be talking right now about how we can look after our people and the well-being of our workforce. So hopefully today we're going to have a bit of a chat around that and maybe come out with some ideas around things we can do differently or add to what we're already doing to look after what is essentially our most valuable asset, which is the people who work in our company. So before we dive into the questions, we'll do a quick introduction. So Kat, do you mind just giving us an introduction into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for having me here today. So my name's Kat McCauley. I am the Head of Talent and People at Agile Cadence, and we are Microsoft Dynamics 365 specialists. So we're a Microsoft Gold partner, and we help Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Microsoft Dynamics AX users with their performance, licensing, managed services, cloud services, and DevOps. So we have a head office in Perth in Scotland, beautiful location if you've ever been, but a very remote workforce all across the UK and even as far as New Zealand and Australia. And well-being for us at Agile Cadence has always been something that's very core to our business in terms of what we do, our approach with people. So yeah, it's great to be here today. And as you say, Paul, I think this topic right now, hugely important topic. So yeah, looking forward to today's conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, Kat. And Rhiannon, welcome. Please, a little intro into who you are and what you do, please.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Rhiannon. I'm Head of People for HiSpace. So we are a relatively small, sort of about 40 to 50 people at the moment, company. We are in the events industry. So we have one of the largest venue marketplaces in the UK. And we kind of focus on everything that kind of comes with events. So if you're looking to book an event through a venue, we have essentially very similar to kind of a booking.com type marketplace. But we also offer event planning services and more of an agency type offering on the side of that as well. Again, our workforce is predominantly sort of remote first. We do have kind of office days and co-working spaces and things like that, but the team are largely based in London with some people kind of spotted around the UK. We do have a couple in Scotland, in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and actually we have a small kind of cohort out in North Macedonia as well. But yeah, agreed. Wellbeing's a super important thing to us. It's always been key to HiSpace's culture as a whole. Our co-founders, Will and Ed, are the most passionate about those types of things. So again, really looking forward to having a good chat about it today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rhiannon. And I think from talking to you both about this topic offline or outside of this conversation, it's clear you're both working for companies that really put well-being at the forefront of their strategy and their values, which is fantastic. I suppose my first question, though, really, and Rhiannon, I'll go back to yourself. If you look more generally, from what you see, from what you hear, from LinkedIn, from the news, whatever, where do you feel we're at in general when it comes to employee well-being in the workplace? Do you think we've made great leaps forward? Are we going backwards? What do you feel?
I think generally we're definitely in a more kind of open and largely more positive place with wellbeing than we were pre-pandemic. If we can cast our minds back that far now, it feels like we're in a stronger place for sure, definitely in my opinion. I think largely that comes from employees being more vocal about their needs and having the confidence to ultimately vote with their feet if they don't feel like they're supported enough. We've seen that with the recruitment challenges of recent years. So I think that's kind of compounded as employers are understanding that having there's a lot of value in having healthy and happy employees, and that they can bring a lot of engagement and a lot of great performance when we focus on well-being. I think perhaps in recent sort of months we've maybe seen a little bit of a backwards step, kind of amidst the economic challenges. If you read the stories about layoffs at big tech companies like Meta, Google, Twitter, and the methods that they've employed in kind of doing those layoffs, it's kind of, for me, highlighted that well-being has been seen as a bit of a nice to have. And it's kind of important when it needs to be, but then can be kind of put by the wayside. So I feel the next stage really for the world and for businesses is to kind of make wellbeing strategies non-negotiable, in the same way that we see things like holiday pay, statutory sick pay, those kinds of things. And particularly we've seen in the case of Twitter, social media plays a huge part. If you don't put wellbeing at the forefront and you don't treat people with respect and properly, you'll hear about it, and that can, not to kind of use it as a negative, but that's definitely something that we should be considering when we're making decisions on how we treat our people, alongside the moral aspect.
Of course, you've got to look at, it's the right thing to do to treat people right, but there's a commercial element to it as well. People talk on social media right now. I think it's interesting there's an interesting paradox in the layoffs with the tech giants. Obviously, Twitter laid lots of people off, Meta also laid people off. Both of them did similar things, but I think you could say that Twitter did it with the sword and Meta did it with a kiss, from what I understand, because there's some really good feedback coming out of Meta that I've seen anyway. I'm sure that everyone's got the different experiences around the packages they were offered, the way they were treated with empathy and sympathy. Whereas Twitter was just kind of like, if you get an email tonight, then you can come back in tomorrow. If not, then see you later. But Kat, what are you seeing? What are you seeing in the workplace and the market in general? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, really similar to Rhiannon, actually, really similar. When I think back to the workplace, when I sort of entered as a fresh-faced graduate in kind of 2010, 2011, yes, I think since then we have absolutely made great leaps forward. Then wellbeing wasn't something that was really on the agenda or as prevalent then as it is now, and it's probably much more reactive then as well. Whereas I think, like Rhiannon said, particularly following COVID, the pandemic, it's really helped to accelerate that focus on employee well-being. And I think we have seen, progress in the workplace, and I think that that's fantastic. But it's also about time too, because, employers have a duty of care to their employees, but there's also so much research which shows this intrinsic link between the health of our employees and the effect that it has on the performance of your business. So at Agile Cadence, we've always made sure that, our strategy and our focus is, if we look after our team, we look after their health, we make sure that they're supported, the results will follow as a result, and employees who are healthy and supported at work, do produce higher quality work. They're more productive, more engaged, more creative. And this all obviously has an impact on the bottom line as well. So I think there's a real opportunity for organizations who offer these great cultures to really they've really stepped up. That's what people want now. The world has changed. But that being said, like Rhiannon mentioned, exactly the same. I think there has been a little bit of a step back. And I think this narrative around back to work, the world has gone back to normal, is a little bit concerning, and you only have to look on LinkedIn, the App Store. Corporate wellness industry has expanded hugely, and that tells us something. That tells us, along with the mental health statistics, that that need is there now, more than ever. And the last few years have been really tough. We've had a cost of living crisis, we've had a global pandemic, we've had overseas crisis, with Ukraine. So I don't think the last 3 years can be underestimated. So for me, it's not business as usual or as it was before. I think that well-being needs to firmly be part of a company strategy, like you said, in terms of that annual leave requirement, statutory requirement, and really embedded into an organisation, because it's here to stay, and it shouldn't be seen as a benefit or a perk. It's here to stay, and it's necessary as part of organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned around the talk around the return to office. This is always a big conversation piece for me, and I am a huge advocate of a very flexible working environment. My actual personal choice, I'd actually rather be in the office most of the time. Personally, I'd actually rather be. Don't want to spend 2 hours on a train. But if I can go to an office where I can work with people I like working with, then I'd rather do that. I'm a big advocate for flexible working, because I think it opens opportunities up to a lot of more people. And I think often when you see a push on LinkedIn of people pushing people back to the office, it's generally someone in a position of privilege. And I don't think they're taking into account people's different situations and how that can affect them. But Kat, where do you think this conversation around remote working and office work, how does that all tie in to the discussion around well-being, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because people are in very different camps. You have the camp that are desperate to be in the office all the time. They want that 5 days per week, for example. They like the social buzz, and they're worried about the impact of remote working. You then have the other camp who are completely the opposite and want to remote work all the time, would like to be at home, are concerned about the reduction in autonomy and flexibility, that the impact it's going to have on their work-life balance. And then you have those that want a little bit of both. Me personally, I enjoy a little bit of both. I love the flexibility working from home, but I love the ability to be able to go into the office, and I feel fortunate to stay near an office that I can do that and have that face-to-face interaction. I think when it comes to sort of your well-being, ultimately as the location of work evolves, I think what's important is your approach to well-being, your strategy, your initiatives. They just have to evolve, with it. For Agile Cadence, we've always had a remote workforce. We have an office in Perth. We've got a team scattered across the UK, and so for us, we've always had to consider our approach on well-being from a remote standby. And remote working does have huge benefits for our well-being, as well. And we've seen research showing, that it has given people, greater flexibility and autonomy over their work. People have been able to use commuting time to exercise or go and pick the kids up from school earlier and be much more present, which is all fantastic. But on the other side, we've also seen, research showing that there's been an increase in loneliness, and also a very much a blurring of the professional sort of home boundaries as well. So I think we just have to have an awareness of that, and we just have to evolve our wellness, and our well-being strategies around that.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's dive into some tactics, some ideas, some initiatives on how we can look after our people. So, Rhiannon, could you share some effective ways for you that either you put into action or you are in action at your business that help to, I suppose, measure employee wellbeing first of all, and then ensure that these initiatives are actually making a difference?
Sure, yeah. So first and foremost, to kind of measure, I probably should have said this at the beginning, bit of background. I actually started at HiSpace in August last year. So I'm still kind of in my first year and still kind of evolving the people strategy as we go. We've always done a form of an employee engagement survey. It was quarterly up until the beginning of this year, and we've now brought that in to be monthly. We've incorporated our HR system that we use as well to make sure that we're kind of automating where we can, because I feel like making things more automated, making things particularly the confidence in the fact that it's confidential, for example, for the teams. They know that if they're responding through that system, that we're not in control of kind of the data that we've got in that sense. So we're getting a more honest response, I feel. But we've been doing that monthly for sort of the last 2 or 3 months now. We're pulling NPS scores from it, which is something that we're using to generally track trends so that we can see that we're making a positive impact with the initiatives. We also have more qualitative data in terms of responses to forms. We ask questions around whether they feel supported in their well-being, whether they feel supported in their personal growth and development, their opinions on their relationships with their line managers, and asking for kind of more general feedback as well, that we can use to kind of create our strategy or amend it. What we have found is that really we kind of need some more data, and so we're getting to the point where we're kind of going, okay, we can see these trends, we can see a rough idea of where we're going. We've obviously got all these great ideas for initiatives, or we've already got these great initiatives in place. And so we're now looking at an engagement, like a specific engagement platform. So we're personally looking at Office Vibe at the moment, which will enable us to kind of really drill down departmentally. It'll enable us to kind of look at various different aspects, like your relationship with your manager, well-being, stress, burnout, personal growth. So we can really pinpoint any kind of pressure areas and also shape our initiatives as we move forward. And in terms of kind of the initiatives that we do offer, the one that I think I'm probably most proud of is that we actually have a company therapist. So her name's Sophia. She doesn't work, she's not employed by us, she's not on our payroll, but she works with us very closely. We offer all of our team a session a month. Obviously, if there's any kind of crisis or any need for more, we can definitely kind of accommodate that, but everybody as a standard gets a session a month that they can choose to use or not. We don't kind of know who's used it and who hasn't. We do see it being taken up, which is fantastic. And that's kind of the thing that whenever I'm talking to candidates or new employees, and I'll talk them through the benefits that we offer, that's always the one that kind of gets the ooh, so that's always a really great one. We also offer things that I'd say are probably or should be pretty standard now, like company sick pay, flexible working, team socials. We have a social committee that organise really regular team socials, lots of fun things that incorporate physical activity like walks, sports days, laser tag. And we also have things like passes to co-working spaces. So whilst we are a predominantly remote workforce, pre-pandemic we were fully in the office. Being in the events industry, it's generally a more face-to-face type of industry, and we are actually seeing calls from the team to be more face-to-face and to be more in the office together, which is really quite nice problem to have. I think people generally are seeing a more of a resistance than we are personally. But we offer passes to co-working spaces kind of all around London, that enable the team to kind of get together or just go and have a more social aspect. The places that they do go to have things like book clubs, tennis clubs, chess clubs, all kinds of things as well. So there's that social element that maybe isn't directly related to higher space, but we enable them to be able to take part in those things as well.
And with the therapist, because I've started hearing that a little bit more. It's not common certainly, but I've heard a couple of companies doing it, kind of having a therapist on retainer, if you like, and not on the payroll, as you said. How do you make sure everyone understands that the therapist? This might sound obvious, but I think communication is really key with these things. How do you make sure that everyone understands that therapist is there and what that therapist is there for? And I suppose the reason I think back to when I was employed in a business, we had an EAP, or lots of companies did, but no one really knew what to go to it for or how to use it or what support it could get. So how do you make sure everyone understands the benefit and the access they can have to that therapist?
So we sort of have various different ways that we'll do this. So we have regular touch points anyway as a company as a whole. We actually have a huddle, we call it, in the morning first thing, where we have a schedule of kind of updates from each different department. So for example, the people update is every other Friday, and I'll use that as a platform to have a conversation with the whole team to kind of say, hey, here's a reminder of things, particularly in things like mental health week and stuff like that. I'll kind of use that as a platform to say, here's all the benefits that we offer. Alongside the therapist, we've got kind of wellbeing platforms and stuff like that people can access. And so kind of being able to bring that to people's attention as regularly as possible is really important for our current employees. We also have it as part of our onboarding package. So I'll have a session with all of our new employees when they join, where I'll walk them through kind of all the more boring bits, but I'll also then talk them through the benefits that we offer, and that's something that I'll kind of explain. And then I think probably one of the more important things, particularly if you're looking at kind of the therapist specifically, is kind of having that information on an intranet that people can access without having to come through me or through their line manager to do it. It's, as much as we really encourage being open about our mental health, and our leaders are all really, really open and honest about their mental health and things like that. Some people aren't, and that's totally okay. So just being able to kind of point people to say, hey, look, if ever you do need this, here's where you can find the information about how to access them. You don't need to come through us to do it. You just contact her directly. She'll organise the appointment. We essentially just get invoiced for any sessions that she's done, and we don't see anything. And just kind of reassuring people about that, I think, is really important, and letting them access it without having to come through us.
Makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, and Kat, I know that Agile Cadence was formed very much with the well-being of its people in mind, and you talked about that was kind of the vision for the founder. How do the leaders in the business kind of model that and allow it to filter down? Because I think leadership plays a really important role in people feeling, I suppose, comfortable and being able to express how they feel, and what they need, and that kind of stuff. So how does it filter down from the leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership engagement, leadership modeling, healthy habits, doing, practice what you preach is incredibly powerful, I think, in influencing the overall employee well-being. I actually think that for any well-being strategy that you do, and in any initiatives that you do, leadership engagement, certainly from my experience, it's either going to be your biggest ally or your biggest enemy. It's either really going to make your well-being strategy, everything, come together and sing, or it's really going to, pull it apart. So, if you've got all these wonderful well-being initiatives, these comms coming from the people team or whoever it is that's responsible, yet your leadership team are not taking lunch hours, they don't do exercise, they are working long hours or sending emails late at night and expecting their team to do the same, it's obviously going to undermine anything that you do. But if you've got wonderful wellbeing initiatives, in place, like many of the stuff that Rhiannon's mentioned, and then you have a leadership team, like we do at Agile Cadence, which is great, that model those healthy habits, that speak openly about mental health, about wellbeing in general. For me, that's what makes it flourish. And I think what we've, this for me has been a big thing at Agile Cadence in terms of making our approach to wellbeing a success, creating a culture of support. And from a HR perspective, it's made my job a lot easier, to have a leadership team who are equally as passionate about this as I am. And I think for me, when leaders talk about wellbeing, talk about mental health, they let people know that it's okay. It's okay to prioritize your health and your well-being, and they're not going to be looked down on if they do. And I think that's the big shift from sort of years ago, that leaders, I've worked in places where leaders have walked the office at 4 o'clock on a Friday to see who's still at their desk, not necessarily as a good thing. So yeah, you want leaders to show that they're human at the end of the day, because they are. People want that personal angle. I think we all engage with that more. I think if you do a post on LinkedIn, quite often the personal ones are the ones that get the most likes or interaction. So I think we need to discourage those leaders who are that model stress and overworking as the norm. And actually leaders and managers, we want leaders and managers who have interpersonal skills, that have a genuine interest in their team, that want to care about their team, ensure that they feel supported, valued, and so that all of this then in turn enhances the well-being experience. And as I say, I feel really fortunate at Agile Cadence that right from the top, our CEO, our owner, that's why he started Agile Cadence. He wanted to create something different, and their focus has always been, if we look after our team, we look after their health, their well-being, everything else will follow. The results will follow. And yeah, when I went to meet with James, our owner, and then similarly met the other members of the leadership team from a HR people perspective, I mean, it was the dream, So it's really, really helped, I think, our well-being approach and our culture to really flourish?
It's really tricky. I think from a leadership point of view, if I think about how I came up, and I certainly came up in environments whereby if you left the office at 6 o'clock, you got a round of applause, or are you doing a half day, mate, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's and I think the role of leaders I think it's changed. I feel like had to change really quickly. Even 4 or 5 years ago, I think you'd still have leaders who were modelling, if I work really hard, everyone else is going to work really hard. So if I overwork, then people will see that that's the way to do it. I'm leading from the front, I'm doing it with the people. And there's probably actually some good intentions in that. It's not, I don't think there's bad intentions in that philosophy. But now it's very much about demonstrating that it's okay to take your foot off the gas. It's okay to not be replying to emails at the weekends, or even don't send an email at the weekend if you're a leader, of course. And these types of things, because it's really hard sometimes to think outside of what we need and what we expect. You've got to think, okay, what's the impact it's going to have? Me sending this email at 7 p.m. What's it going to have on that person? And it's tricky sometimes. Rhiannon, what about where you are in terms of the anything that the leaders do? I suppose specifically to ensure that people feel like well-being is a real important part of the business.
Yeah, so I think lead by example is a saying for a reason. I think Will and Ed and Mike, our COO as well, is along with the rest of the kind of more senior leadership team, are really, really great with stuff like that. I feel, from what Kat's been saying, a lot of that resonates with with me, particularly when I was kind of going and having those conversations when I was joining the team. It's just an absolute joy from an HR perspective to work with leaders that kind of model that behaviour naturally, and you don't have to do much kind of dragging along with you. But I think, part of having that engaged and committed workforce does mean that they're committed to their roles. And so, for example, in my personal experience, I find it really difficult to switch off. And in previous roles, I'm the kind of person that if I get an email at 7 p.m, I'll be reading it and I'll be replying to it, because that's just kind of the way that I am. And I think a lot, particularly when you have a team that's really engaged in their role and really passionate about what they do, there's that danger that they'll fall into doing that. So one thing that we do that I'm really, really proud of, and actually I found, having taken a bit of annual leave myself recently, has just enabled me to really, really switch off, is that people don't send messages on weekends. They don't send messages at evenings. If you're on holiday, it can wait, or they'll deal with it themselves. And I came back from a week annual leave with no Slack messages beyond the kind of general team updates and stuff like that, which was just, I think it sounds really small and it sounds really trivial, but having that kind of knowledge that you're not going to come back to this barrage of stuff, so you don't feel the need to check in the evenings and stuff like that. That's modeled by our leadership team, by not sending those messages in the first place, being quite disciplined about sending them, about when they're responding, those kinds of things, as well as switching off. So like Will, our CEO, for example, he's very disciplined with when he's sending his messages, when he's available. He very much has his like notifications on mute a lot of the time, and he encourages other people to do the same thing. He doesn't expect an immediate response when he doesn't give one himself, and he kind of really respects his time, and respects everybody else's time. I think that's the most important thing. Along with having kind of a lot of advocates in our leadership team for things that like mental health. They'll talk quite openly about these things, or talk quite openly about their well-being, any challenges that they're facing. And I feel that kind of sets the tone for how we as a company talk about mental health. So, along with all of those support initiatives that we've got as well, I think definitely that modelling is something that really, I agree with Kat, completely makes it flourish.
And there's, of course, within well-being, there's lots of kind of sub-pockets, and we'll delve into a few of them. I suppose one of the first ones I wanted to ask about specifically was physical health. So, Rhiannon, is there anything that HighSpace is doing around physical health programs and anything the business is doing to support people in their physical health? Because, of course, that ties into mental health, lots of good benefits to that. So anything your business is doing around that?
Yeah, sure. So, physical well-being, as you've said quite rightly, isn't just about physical health. It's for me more of a holistic lifestyle approach, and really about kind of encouraging people to make choices that help them avoid preventable diseases and conditions, and really kind of promote that good mental well-being and balance as well. We as employers have a duty of care towards our employees, and at Hire Space we really aim to provide them with the best possible working environment. So we feel it kind of starts there, whether that's at home or in the office or one of the co-working spaces that we give access to. And one of the real challenges that we've faced, really, particularly with remote work, is the difficulty in kind of properly assessing and making sure that our team are working from healthy spaces, in kind of context of ergonomics, lighting, posture, all those kinds of things within home settings. So what we offer is a home working allowance to all of our employees, which lets them get a good setup. So we'll kind of provide some advice and guidance on anything in particular that they want to have. We do provide kind of screens and things like that as standard, but if they wanted to get a new office chair, a desk, anything like that, or a lamp, when they're kind of setting up their space, we allow them to do that. We have the costs, we have that budget there to mean that they don't have to kind of pay that out of their own pocket. And with the passes to the co-working spaces, that means that, particularly with our team being in London, quite a lot of the time they'll be working in, if they're working from home, they'll be working in a flat, maybe with a couple of other people, and that can kind of be potentially disruptive, or they might not have, the luxury of a separate room that they can go and work in. It might be from their bedroom. So offering them the opportunity to go and work from these co-working spaces, which also have all of the initiatives and all of the groups in there, like tennis clubs and things like that they can take part in, football, all those kinds of things, sports-wise. I feel has been really, really impactful for the team, kind of being able to escape. It just because we don't have an office day on that particular day doesn't mean that they have to work from home. They can go and choose to work from somewhere else if they want to. And we're really, really flexible kind of with that as well. And alongside that, I've kind of already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we have a couple of occasions throughout the year that we'll have a social that's particularly physical. That we've just done laser tag as a team. We've got our sports day coming up next month, which is always a really fun one. Lots of space hoppers and three-legged races and things. And we also have in October, generally kind of the latter half of the year, we'll have a walk where we kind of just set off along the canal and we'll just kind of go for a bit, and we all kind of stay together as a group. It's a great little social activity. But as always, there's loads more to do. So that's something that we're consistently working on as a part of our social committee and things like that.
My business partner's just come into the office space a little bit late today because he had his kids' sports day. He was very disappointed there was no parents' race or anything like that, because he was looking forward to showing his little girls how fast he still is.
Been training all year.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's looking for his moment of glory. It's interesting you said around I suppose it made me think, you're talking around the creating a good workspace for people at home. I know of, and I won't name them, but I heard of a recruitment agency in 2020 where a hiring manager, a line manager, went to the board and said, look, can we get some screens and chairs for people to work from home? And the answer was no, because that means they won't come back to the office. And that is unfortunate mentality of some people. But anything else, Kat, in terms of that physical well-being piece that Agile Cadence are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to a lot of what Rhiannon's touched on. Again, a lot of the same, initiatives that we're doing. I think pre sort of COVID, where it was a lot more office based, obviously you used to see typically some larger organizations might have gyms on site. So with that remote element, trying to move away to more of a, you've got access to clubs and gyms on a more UK-wide basis. So that's what we do at Agile Cadence. You have gym discounts so that you can choose where you want to go close to you if that's something of interest. We've also put in place a health and wellbeing platform by Champion Health, which has been really great. So that offers a variety of different classes that people can do at any time of the day that suits them. And whether that is more sort of cardio classes or more yoga, but it also offers the nutritional piece as well, recipes, podcasts, resources things like that. So that's been really positive, and that's something that the team can also do. You know, they can do classes together if they want, but they can also grant access to family and friends as part of that. So again, for Agile Cadence, it's not just about looking after the health and well-being of your team, but it's extending that support network, you know, beyond and around, you know, around you. The other thing, again, yeah, we're really trying to encourage people to take breaks. Again, that working from home, as a lot of our team do. I know I'm very guilty of it as well. I think I probably take less breaks at home than I do in the office. But again, you know, people have that worry of their status turning to away, and will people know that I am working or I'm present? So, you know, again, we've done a lot around, you know, messaging with the team and the leadership, speaking as part of team meetings, one-to-ones, managers, about taking a break, taking time away from your work, very much going out, doing exercise, get out in nature. In fact, I think our CEO took our director of operations for something like a 10k run on day one or something like that. Not for me. I managed to avoid that, but you know, physical activity and exercise is very much part of Agile Cadence. James is often on a mountain bike up a hill somewhere having meetings with clients. We encourage walking meetings as well, which is a bit more challenging because of what we do. It's very laptop based. But if you're having catch-ups, they don't need to be done necessarily at a laptop. You know, they can be done out on a walk or meeting somewhere as well. If you've got people that are close to you, you know, go get together, catch up, do a class. And we've also done fitness challenges too, which have worked really well, again, to bridge that gap between having an office sort of team and more of a remote team, to try and make sure that there's that collaboration and people are working together. So that's worked really well, and it's allowed people to join in kind of whatever their fitness is. And really, again, I think it's just come back to leadership giving it the okay, but also setting the example, you know, and you see them going out to a class or going out for a walk, or, you know, and it's really encouraged others to do the same and made others go, oh, it's okay to do this. This is a good thing.
I hope that 10k run wasn't a surprise to the person.
She's very good at running, so you know it would have been a huge surprise to me. But yeah, she's very good at running, Rach. So yeah, she'll have coped tremendously with it.
Good, glad to hear it. So that's the physical side. What about? Let's talk about the financial side. And I think this is often, for some reason, an understated element of people's mental well-being and mental health. And yeah, it is probably the thing, certainly right now, it's probably one of the things that's stressing people out the most and is making people the most concerned. I think, and also as well, I suppose, just reverting quickly back to our talk around flexibility in the office. If you're looking to look after the financial well-being of your people, think about whether you actually need them in the office, because people pay. If I want to go to London for a day, that's 60 quid for me. You know, and if people are doing that a couple of days a week, suddenly that's £480 a month. So that can add a lot of pressure. Kat, is anything Agile Cadence are doing to specifically around the financial well-being of their people?
Yeah, so for me, what we've done at Agile Cadence, we've done a few different things really. So for me, it's about ensuring, first of all, very simple, that people are paid fairly for the work that they do. You know, so making sure that salary is increased in line with, you know, market data, inflation. You know, we need to make sure that we're continually reviewing that, and that pay bands are reflected correctly for the roles that people do. At Agile Cadence, we also gave people a one-off payment at the end of last year as an acknowledgement for the cost of living crisis as well. So that was to support the team, and sort of regardless of the role or the level, it was paid at a flat rate, so that those who were at the lower level and with lower level income could really benefit from that. Our team also has access to sort of an employee assistance type program with counselling as well. So that's there to discuss any financial worries or concerns that our employees have. And again, through our health and wellbeing platform, they can access resources there. And we continue to try and signpost the team to organisations who deal specifically with financial well-being. So we try to do a lot. I think, like you say, it's a key pillar within well-being. I think that's often forgotten about, and it's, it's a huge concern right now. I actually, before I came on here, was having a look at some of the research around it and made a note. And there was research by the Living Wage Foundation that said that more than 3/4 of low-paid workers feel that this is the worst financial period that they've ever faced. And in that same study, they'd said that half, so 56% of those surveyed said they had to use food banks, and 42% said they were regularly skipping meals for financial reasons, and 32% couldn't heat their homes. And if we think about those people in the context of our own organisations, that's quite a significant, number. So, it's really tough right now. So absolutely, I think it's a really key pillar within well-being, and it's trying to do really as much as you can around providing support to people and providing them with those resources. So that's some of the stuff that Agile Cadence is done at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's some worrying stats. And I suppose what's the most worrying is we're not fully in it yet. I think we're about to head into probably the hardest period financially for the country as we hit into lots more people ending their mortgage terms, going on to the higher rates, and we're going to hit winter where people are going to be hitting a double whammy of the high mortgage rates and the high winter bills as well. So it's a tough time coming up. Rhiannon, anything that your business is doing is around the financial side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what Kat's saying is very, very similar to the approach that we're taking, if not almost identical, really. So there's not a hell of a lot more I can kind of add aside from sort of where we're exploring opportunities alongside. So we also have that wellbeing platform that offers a lot of different resources like financial coaching, financial wellbeing education, and advice and guidance and things like that. So we'll signpost to those on a regular basis. We will bring in internal kind of comms around it, any kind of signposting in that sense. Something that we haven't done yet, but that's on the horizon is financial education. So more kind of training internally, more kind of, I say training, just kind of more advice, guidance, tips, tricks, things that they can do to kind of help. We very similarly did do a cost of living payment for all of the team last year. And we do regular benchmarking kind of every 6 months to make sure that we're paying in line with what's the market rate and what's fair. And kind of aside from that, we've tailored our approach. We have generally a younger workforce. We, in terms of that multi-generational aspect, don't particularly have many people of an older generation in our kind of demographic, but that just kind of means that we're tailoring our approaches. For example, a lot of the team aren't necessarily thinking about taking their pension yet, but they are definitely thinking about buying their first home. So providing more advice and guidance on those things. I've kind of got some plans in the works for ways that we can incorporate buying a home into the contributions that they make. For example, as opposed to making a contribution into a pension, they might be able to make a contribution into an ISA, and we can kind of support that. Very much in the works at the moment, so don't hold me to it, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking at in being able to support people. I agree with you, Paul. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I feel it's going to get worse before it gets better. And something that we're really, really aware of, particularly with people living in London, is that the rents in general are going crazy anyway. Mortgage rates perhaps aren't as key for a lot of the team. It's more about kind of rents and that kind of thing. But they're equally, a lot of the landlords are selling up now. They can't afford to keep that. So we've seen actually quite a few of the team having to move house, being put in the position where they're having to find another place to live, and that's put a lot of stress on them, particularly just from a general wellbeing perspective, but finances as well. You've got to come up with a deposit and things like that for taking out new rental agreements. So we're kind of working with those to kind of help and support them with making sure that they've got enough time to find somewhere to live. Quite often they don't get given a lot of notice of being essentially made homeless. So it's something that we are seeing a lot of. along, we're also kind of exploring the option of working with companies like Bipit, for example, that have financial wellbeing platforms with coaches and kind of regular quarterly reviews. They have access to bank accounts, stuff like that, so they can really give that specific advice. And I think there's definitely an appetite for that within the company, for sure. People are actively asking for that advice and that guidance.
Yeah, really good to hear how HireSpace are looking after their people around all this stuff that's going on, particularly with people having to move out. I've seen it happen a lot to people who are just having to get out of their property because the landlord's having to sell up. So yeah, absolutely rings true. For a couple more questions then. So I suppose, of course, I think in any business there's cycles of very, very busy periods, more stressful periods than others, whatever it is, maybe a product launch or whatever, some need to get some stuff done, firefighting and whatnot. Rhiannon, during those highly stressful periods, what are we doing to make sure our people aren't at risk of burnout?
So this is kind of where we're at right now in HireSpace as a company. Over the last kind of year, we've seen 20 to 25% growth in headcount, predominantly over the last quarter, if not definitely the first half of this year. So it's been quite a significant and quite speedy growth. I think the majority that the way that we've made sure that we're keeping on track of kind of that high stress and the burnout is using regular touch points to make sure that we're talking about wellbeing, we're asking for feedback, we're giving those tips, offering the support. We do that through regular one-to-ones, so we have a structure in place between line managers and employees to make sure that there's a good line of communication there. We're making sure that we're asking the questions that we need to make sure that we're kind of covering all the bases. And I think there's also a really important there's a really big need for that line of communication between HR and line managers. So I do a lot of coaching with line managers to look for the early signs of burnout, look for the early signs of mental health deterioration, and being able to know kind of what they can do about it and how they can raise that to me, what I can do about it, what we as a company can do about it, and kind of really catching it as early as we possibly can. Generally, people don't tend to speak up until it's too late. So I think we have a responsibility as employers to look for those signs and actively reach out and be proactive in our support and the provision of that support. We can't just rest on our laurels and wait for people to come to us. I think probably one of the key things as well for me is that we're really credible. So making sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do when we're approached with some concerns, I feel really encourages people to be able to reach out again or to talk about that with their team, to enable them to reach out if they need support. I feel one of the major damaging things that we can do is to kind of go, talk to us, we can help, and people will come to us, talk about something, say, look, I'm feeling really burnt out, I'm feeling overworked, I feel stressed, and kind of going, oh yeah, we can do this or we can look at that, and ultimately nothing changes. I feel that's probably one of the most damaging things that can happen. But aside from that, kind of more generally, we're also consistently kind of assessing headcount, making sure that, for example, the KPIs and things, that we have quite a large number of salespeople in our team, and we kind of have capped their targets so that we're never asking kind of too much of them. If we need more revenue, we need more headcount, as opposed to trying to squeeze all the life out of the people that we've got. We don't think that's kind of fair. So that consistent review of headcount to make sure that everybody feels supported. In my role currently, I'm standalone, but we've had conversations between myself and my line manager, my COO, about when the right time for support is for me, for example. And there's very much that kind of consistent conversation about how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you're able to cope? What can we do to support? What's reasonable? Let's make a plan for action and let's follow through on it.
100%. And we've got a questions come through actually from Sophie, Rhiannon, which is, what do you consider to be the signs? Sure.
So I think there's a few, especially if you consider it in the context of a remote workforce. For me, I think one of the major signs, aside from behavioural changes, like, for example, if they become a little bit shorter or snappier, or I think the main thing, the first sign for me is if people stop engaging where they have previously engaged. Obviously, we know people are introverts and extroverts, so there's definitely a pattern there, and that's fine. People are entitled to do that. But if somebody who's previously been really, really involved in things completely drops off and is unavailable, or I say unavailable, not around or not involving themselves in the day-to-day in the way that they have done previously, that's one of the first signs for me. They'll also talk. Generally, they'll talk to the team around them. They might mention things to their line manager. So being able to kind of have that dotted line, that connection, that kind of finger on the pulse of the organization, you might not necessarily hear it directly from them, but you'll definitely hear kind of whispers on the grapevine of, this person's been really struggling with this person's been really struggling with that, or I feel like there's something wrong, from the people that work with them day to day, and actually not kind of dismissing that and listening to people when they're going, I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's something not right here with this person that I work with, is a super important thing to look out for as well.
I think it goes back to it's so important that leadership have the right training and support to spot these things, because the thing with burnout, for me, as somebody who has got himself burnt out a few times before, you don't know it I didn't know it. When I was in it, it wasn't until I came out, I was like, oh shit, I was really burnt out there. I really need this, a few weeks off or whatever. And you don't know it. So to expect, you need to almost expect other people to spot something that you can't spot in yourself. So it's really tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for the question, Sophie. Kat, anything else I suppose this relationship, before we wrap this up, anything else around how you're working with line managers, I suppose, just to kind of support them with this, because it's tricky, and I think managers get blamed a lot of the time for not spotting this, not spotting that, but they have to have the support and the training, and they have to have these skills which maybe 5 years ago didn't even matter. So how are we working with them to make sure we're they're able to do that, do what they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration between HR team, people team, and line managers, it's absolutely crucial, isn't it, to supporting and promoting employee well-being. And I think too often in the past, particularly like you said there, it was kind of seen as a HR thing, and managers maybe get a bad rap for not taking sort of ownership. I remember actually in one organization going in many, many years ago, and there being this huge folder full of long-term absent cases, and it was the HR person's role to just sit and go through these cases, which were people with real, valid reasons for being off sick, and there was no input from line manager. And if you think of yourself in the context of your organization, if you went off sick tomorrow and your line manager wasn't in contact with you, the effect that has on that relationship with you, with your employer, your manager, if you were going to return to work. So line managers they're in a really unique position of power, and with that I think comes a lot of responsibility, in terms of looking after their direct reports. So I see HR and the people team as very much providing the framework, for bringing the wellbeing strategy into place, for rolling out training, for providing managers with the tools so that they're comfortable and they're confident and they have the knowledge to be able to effectively promote and support well-being in line with the culture and the strategy. But like you say, Paul, I think too often we kind of expect managers to manage without actually giving them the right tools and support. And I know a lot of managers, when it comes to well-being or mental health conversations that could be difficult, and they're often scared and they're daunted by the aspect of it. It's not because they don't want to do it, or it's not something that they care about or they're passionate. It's something that they've maybe not been appropriately trained. So I think we have a real responsibility to make sure that line managers are trained, not just from a legal aspect, but for our employees as well, for them as an employee, we've got a duty of care for them. And there was a survey done, I think, by Great Place to Work, and what was interesting was that what came out of it, above all wellbeing initiatives, perks, benefits that you have, the one thing that people wanted was just catch up with their manager, just their manager asking, how are you getting on? So simple, no cost, not groundbreaking, literally their manager having that time to talk to them, not just about work, but on a personal aspect. So for me, you know, that's the main thing. But on the flip side is we actually also have to consider people like our line managers, like our HR teams, is who's checking in on their well-being, you know, as well, and how can we make sure that the pressure of supporting other individuals in a time right now that it's really difficult. It's been a really difficult few years. I think, like you say, it still is difficult and will continue to be. So how can we make sure that we're looking after their health and well-being as well, and that it doesn't become a detriment? So again, you know, good training in place around mental health and well-being, but really good peer support, collaboration, working together, supporting one another. The people team, the line managers, they really need to work together because we need them for any well-being strategy that we're going to deliver. So we need to all collaborate and work together. And it's the same thing, it's the same goal that we're all working towards anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Kat. And then I suppose final question from me, just to put a bow on this. If you're final bits of advice from you both, if you're a business who is just thinking, right, we probably need to put more focus on the well-being of our people. Perhaps they're a startup, they haven't even considered this kind of element yet. What would be your starting point, Kat? What would be your first bit of advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. First of all, you know, if you're looking to start your well-being journey within a company, it's really exciting. I think the first thing is to make sure that, you know, any well-being initiatives that you're looking at, I think, are not, they're not implemented in isolation. So, you know, to be really successful and meaningful and not just a tick box, we need to make sure that we have the leadership engagement and support. And we need to work on creating a culture as well that's conducive to one that encourages employees to look after all aspects of their well-being, and, you know, provide the tools and resources to do that as well. And then there's also, I think, before you get to the initiatives bit, some of the more, I guess, sort of basic hygiene factors around, you know, the organizational structure, people's job designs, their workload, because it's all very well having all these great, fantastic initiatives in place, but not having a workload or a job, you know, that's designed, or a structure that doesn't allow people the time to access these initiatives. I think the engagement surveys, as we touched on earlier, well-being surveys are also a great place to start if you're looking to start on implementing that well-being journey within your organization. So making it anonymous, just as Rhiannon had mentioned, and, you know, getting that feedback to identify what's your starting point. You know, what do your team want? Where are you in the scope of well-being? You know, are you right at the top and it's, yeah, you're doing a great job and we feel really valued and cared for, or actually there's some really big issues there where people don't feel valued, they don't feel looked after. So definitely, I think, get engagement with the team, whether that's in the form of engagement or talking or using team meetings, line managers, and then creating an action plan from that. So feeding that back to the team, creating an action plan, and that might include things like your employee assistance programs, your mental health first aiders, well-being initiatives, a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about today. But there's so much out there. You have to choose, I think, what's right for your organization, what you think your team will benefit from, and what you think will make a difference to well-being. So yeah, looking at all that, reviewing it, making sure that it's fit for your culture, your organization. And awareness days, Rhiannon touched on them. They're a great place to start. And there's organizations that you know, provide so many resources now to people around that time. So if you're looking for, you know, because you have to think about cost as part of this as well, and what your organization can afford. So awareness days, they offer loads of great resources around there. LinkedIn, another amazing place to start in terms of looking at resources for well-being as well.
Thanks, Kat. I missed about 20 seconds of that because my headset was somehow connected to my phone as well. It started ringing and I couldn't hear anything. So Rhiannon and the audience just heard a little bit that I didn't, but I'm sure it was good content, whatever it was. Rhiannon, final, same question to you, really. Any kind of top line advice to kind of wrap up what we talked about, that you know, starting points for people who are just starting to have this on their radar?
Sure. I mean, Kat's advice was extremely comprehensive and great. You missed out. It was amazing. But I think, just to kind of echo essentially alongside all of the things that Kat said, I would 100% support everything you've said there. I think really the key for me is talking to your employees. Ask them. We're not mind readers at the end of the day. You want to know what they want, you ask them what they want. And I don't feel you can go too far wrong with kind of giving people what they're asking for within reason. I think the hygiene factor is a really important thing as well. So having that good solid base of your basics, so your sick pay, your holiday pay, your job descriptions, workload, culture, of kind of the bit that we touched on earlier in terms of kind of being available 24/7 and things like that. That kind of leadership modeling, those things are generally free or low cost to do, and something that I feel we should use as that kind of that given that I was talking about earlier on in the session. Those are the kind of things that I feel until you've kind of got those things in place, any initiative that you might bring in has far less chance of actually being taken up on. I think being able to have that regular touch point, have those regular opportunities for people to provide feedback is always super important. There was a study done actually by the Institute for Employment Studies that said that one of the most, just trying to find it now after I was just talking about it, one of the most important things for engagement for people is to feel like they belong, and that sense of belonging and the social interaction. So being able to provide those things will enable you to have that more engaged culture, which but in turn gives you people more engaged in providing feedback and being more engaged in any initiatives that you might give. So kind of starting off with that really great point of an engaged team and kind of a social team, a team that feel together, for me is super important. And it doesn't always have to cost the earth. Setting up, for example, we call it World Class HR, but it's essentially a HR forum where once a month I'll make myself available for whoever wants to join me, and they can ask questions. We can talk about particular topics like diversity and inclusion, or if there's a change to anything, kind of talking to people about how they've experienced that change or what they might do differently, or if we're considering, for example, we've recently brought in professional development plans. So before we kind of really launched those, talking to the team about what they want from them and what good looks like to them, and having that continual two-way conversation, I think is super important for general well-being. People, when they feel more in control, are generally more engaged and happier in their work life.
100%. Well, that takes us to 1 minute past the hour. So much content there and so much advice. So thank you both for sparing your time today. Thank you for listening if you listened live, and thank you to the many more who will listen to it on the podcast. So tune in next week. We're going to be talking about how to set up a talent function from scratch. I think this episode won't just be for people who actually need to do that, but also a good chance for you to kind of take a reflective look at your own talent function, see if there's anything you might be able to improve a bit. But tune in next week for that. Rhiannon and Kat, thank you so much for your time today. Great to catch up and great to hear your advice.
Thank you.